Welcome everyone, and Happy New Year to you all. Thank you for joining me for this session, year in review session for cybersecurity. My name is Alina Marie, the Webinar Program Manager at Heimdal Security, and I will be your host for this event. Some of you might already be familiar with me from our previous sessions, but for those of you who are attending our webinars for the first time, please allow me to quickly share a few things about myself. Over the past 15 years, I've worked for companies such as HP and Oracle and Optimize, where I had different roles in IT security, information technology, and compliance. And I'm very passionate about technology, cars, photography, and traveling. It's a real pleasure to have you all here. And for this session, unfortunately, our CSO, Valentin Gersbistilling, couldn't make it due to unforeseen circumstances. However, I'd like to introduce you to my very special guest, Heimdal Security CEO, which is Morten Kajsgaard. So Morten, welcome. Thank you for accepting the invitation to this webinar, and please share a few things about yourself.
Yeah, hi Lynn, and hi everybody, and thank you for joining in. Pleasure to be here with all of you. So as Lynn mentioned, my name is Morten. I'm the CEO of Heimdal. I was also the founder of the company. We've been in the market, as some of you may know, for about 6 years, and of course I've been at Heimdal for all 6 of them. So it's been a really interesting journey, building Heimdal up from nothing to the global player it is today. And that's also a little bit of what we want to talk about here, how the market has evolved, of course. So we're really looking forward to the webinar with you guys. And once again, thank you for joining in.
Thank you for introducing yourself. Let's move on to the agenda for today. We're going to quickly introduce our company, and for those of you who are attending the webinar for the first time and maybe haven't heard about us. And then we'll have an overview of the cybersecurity landscape and the major incidents in 2020. And then we'll also share some customer insights and 2020 trends, moving forward to 2021 cybersecurity predictions and preparedness advice, as well as sharing our company vision and strategy for 2021. Of course, towards the end, we'll have the Q&A session. If you have any questions during the webinar, please type them into the question box of your GoToWebinar control panel. We'll try to answer some of the questions in the dedicated session, and for the rest, we'll most definitely get back to you with an email. And of course, at the very end of the webinar, we also have a giveaway that I think you're going to enjoy, so stay with us until the end. And now, let's talk a little bit about Heimdal Security. So, for those of you that haven't heard about us, Heimdal Security is the leading European provider of cloud-based cybersecurity. The Heimdal name originates from the Northern mythology, where Heimdal is the guardian of the Bifrost, which is the only way in and out of Asgard, which is the realm of the Norse gods. If you're familiar with the Thor movies by Marvel, maybe you remember Heimdal. It was played by the actor Idris Elba and was the superhero in the gold-plated armor. And our story as a company started back in 2011 at the DEF CON Capture the Flag Challenge. And for those of you that are unfamiliar with the DEF CON Capture the Flag Challenge, it's basically a competition that gathers teams from all over the world, and that includes teams from the likes of the FBI, the NSA, and of course many other security agencies and services. It's a very professional competition. And then we had our own team that very early in the competition understood that instead of focusing on live interactions and back and forth with the enemy team, they could instead block every single entry point into their server by automatically patching any vulnerable third-party applications, and of course by monitoring all the DNS traffic that was used by the enemy team to get access into their servers. So of course, our team won, and it was actually for the first time in the history of the competition when the Capture the Flag was won by a non-US team, and we managed to do so for 2 years in a row, actually. The intelligence that we gathered back then in 2011 and 2012 was merged into the Heimdal core product, which later on became Foresight. And in 2014, when we took the product to market, we were actually able to completely map out the malicious infrastructure that was used to deliver the original CryptoLocker ransomware. And of course, we handed over that intelligence to the FBI. Intelligence that was used by the FBI proved crucial to the operation, as the FBI managed to locate the malicious servers, and it took the entire cybercriminal organization into custody. And even today, We're working alongside the Europol, the US Department of Justice, the NC3, which is the Danish Police Cybercrime Unit, and of course, securing a more safer digital world for both businesses and consumers. And on a slightly different note, we are honored to have been chosen by the Royal Bank of Scotland as the recommended cybersecurity solution for all their business customers. Let's review what we learned from 2020, from the cybersecurity landscape in 2020. And,
I'm
the
just going to
past
stop you
year,
again there. It seems like you're one slide behind, because now I'm seeing at least about Heimdal. I would assume everybody else is seeing the same. Now I'm seeing the cybersecurity landscape coming up.
okay, awesome. Maybe it's the connection,
Okay.
right? Hopefully it'll get better. I'm really sorry about that. So as I was saying, the year 2020 really brought a lot of important lasting changes in the cyber threat landscape. And there were two distinct things that have significantly contributed to this change. The first one, of course, is the unique and abrupt transformation that was caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, and that forced large-scale adoption of technology in order to master a variety of critical aspects of the crisis, such as coordination of the health services, international response to the spread of COVID-19, of course, the adoption of remote working and remote learning, interpersonal communication, control of lockdown measures, and of course, many others. And on the other hand, we've seen a spike in the already continuous increasing trend in the advanced adversary capabilities of the threat actors. And unfortunately, the latter has amplified the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic in cyberspace. And organizations and cybersecurity professionals and IT teams really found themselves pushed and acting at the limits of their capacities, as in a very short time, they had to quickly respond to these challenges. And at the same time, the COVID-19 pandemic really showed us that the malicious actors have a level of capability that allowed them to quickly adapt to this transformation, and they focused on personalization of their attack vectors, such as advanced credential stealing methods, credential stuffing, highly targeted phishing attacks, advanced social engineering attacks, advanced malware obfuscation techniques, and of course, more extensive penetration of the mobile platforms, since they were extensively used this year. Not that they weren't already, but this year was like a real spike in that as well. And as I mentioned during my last webinar that was related to the artificial intelligence in DNS security, it's just a matter of time until the cyber criminals will start combining these advances with AI and machine learning, and that will undoubtedly lead to a huge increase in successful or even undetectable attacks. So now let's review the major incidents for 2020. Of course, we'll start with the month of January, where Austria's foreign ministry was targeted by a cyber attack. And the ministry said that the seriousness of the attack suggested it might have been carried out by a state actor. And the breach occurred on the same day Austria's Green Party backed forming a coalition with the Conservatives. And then Lazarus Group Apple Juice, they target the cryptocurrency traders with fake installers and a macOS malware, trying to gain access to the cryptocurrencies. We move forward to February. The INA Group, which is Croatia's largest petrol station chain, was impacted by a cyber attack. And it is believed that a ransomware attack to have impaired the chain's ability to issue invoices and accept loyalty cards. And the Gamadon Advanced Persistent Threat improved their tool set to target Ukraine's government and military. And these attacks included digital attacks on physical infrastructure and field hardware. That included artillery, actually, and that happened along with more extended cyber espionage activity. Moving on to March, the European Network of Transmission System Operators for Electricity, so the NTSOE, which is the European power grid organization, if you will, whose members include large electric transmission operators across the continent, really found evidence of a successful cyber intrusion into their office network. And the Brno University Hospital in the Czech Republic, which is actually the nation's second largest hospital, unfortunately had suffered a crippling cyber attack amidst the coronavirus outbreak, causing it to suspend scheduled operation. And at the time, the hospital has been unable to transfer information from key clinical system to its database. It shut down its entirety network and moved its acute patients to another facility. Going further to April, the FBI has issued a warning over cloud-based business email compromise scams that have cost US companies more than $2 billion. And in the same month, 500,000 Zoom accounts were posted for sale on the dark web. And the price for each of those accounts were about 0.002 US dollars. And the information contained the victims' email addresses, their passwords, their personal meeting URLs, their host keys, and the accounts on that list belong to financial institutions, to banks, colleges, and many other organizations. In May, Diebold Nixdorf in Ohio, which is a major provider of ATMs and payment technology, disclosed that a ransomware attack has disrupted some of their operations. And the company said that the hackers didn't affect the ATMs or the customer network, and that the intrusion only affected their corporate network. In the same month, the city of Weiz in Austria, where a Netwalker ransomware was launched against it. The attack affected the public service system, and it leaked some of the stolen data from building applications and inspections. And in June, the University of California in San Francisco was hit by a ransomware. They paid $1.14 million. And the automotive giant Honda suffered a snake ransomware attack, which targeted its offices across the world in the United States, in Europe, and in Japan. And the attack really forced many offices to shut down in what was, likely the most publicized ransomware incident of that specific month. And last but not least, for June, the European energy company Enel Group, they suffered a ransomware attack that impacted their internal network. The incident was the work of the same ransomware operators, the snake ransomware operators, which were basically the same group that targeted Honda. If we move into the second half of 2020, in July, we have Garmin, which is the multinational technology company. They were hit by a ransomware and suffered a worldwide outage where their customers could not access their connected services. That included services like Garmin Connect, Fly Garmin, Strava, and InReach Solutions. And it is believed that they have paid $10 million in ransom, and after 4 days, they have received the decryption key, and their services start to go on online again. And in the same month, the French telecommunication company Orange was the next company to fall victim, this time to the Nephilim ransomware. Luckily for Orange and their 266 million customers, the incident was only related to their business services division. However, the data that was exploited at the time from Orange customers was later added to the Nephilim dark website that details the corporate leaks. In August, the University of Utah in USA was hit by ransomware, and they paid $457,000 in ransom. And moving into Japan, Konica Minolta was hit by the second ransomware attack, which took down the company services for almost a week. And then the camera maker Canon, whose services division experienced an outage, was hit by a Maze ransomware attack, and their internal applications, their email servers, and the US website were impacted by that attack. In September, the Düsseldorf University Hospital was hit by ransomware, and unfortunately, this time we had the very first reported human death as a result of a ransomware attack. And in South America, we learned about a REvil, which is a cyber criminal organization gang attack on the Banco Estado in Chile, which is the one of the Chile's three greatest. and it was first to close all of its branches following that specific attack. In October, believe it or not, the NL Group were hit by ransomware for the second time in 2020. The network again demanded the $14 million ransomware for the decryption key, and not to release several terabytes of stolen data. And in the same month, the German-based game developer Crytek, they suffered an attack at the hands of the Egregore ransomware. In addition to encrypting their devices, the cybercriminal organization claims that they have stolen unencrypted files from Crytek, and they have leaked 380 megabytes archive on their data leak site. In November, the Delaware County in Pennsylvania paid $500,000 in ransom after their systems were hit by the double pay ransomware. And the Manchester United Football Club in the UK made serious headlines when it was revealed that they had suffered a cyber attack, which later on was confirmed to be ransomware. And in the last month of the year, Foxconn, the electronic giant, was hit by a ransomware where the cyber criminals stole unencrypted files before encrypting their devices, and they asked for $34 million in ransom demands. And the European Medicines Agency posted a statement on their website that has stated that they have suffered a cyber attack and that they are investigating at the time with the law enforcement. It seems that some documents that were relating to the regulatory submission of the Pfizer and BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine candidate has been unlawfully accessed on the servers of the European Medicines Agency. So with that, we can see that really threat actors don't discriminate, and they don't really care in which industry your organization activates. They will look for any attack avenue to make their way into and monetize their attacks. And this is why it's crucial to have multiple layers of security to prevent, detect, and of course respond to this type of attacks. And now, before inviting Morten to share with you and with all of us some customer insights that we've learned during the past year, I'm going to actually launch a poll in which I'm going to ask you, the participants, what you believe to have been the 3 cybersecurity trends for the past year. And you'll have a minute to share your answers. We'll look at them, and then we'll move on. So let me see if I can start a poll now. Hope you guys can see it. And I'll be waiting for you to vote.
I see it on screen, Aline, at least.
You can see it?
Yes.
All right, awesome.
Let me see if I can vote in this stuff.
Okay.
I'm clearly not I'm like in the States, I'm not an important voter because I clearly cannot tick the boxes, but I can see the others can, so it seems to be working.
All right, good. We're still collecting responses. We have 20 seconds left.
There's some really interesting voting going on here. I see.
Yeah, exactly. All right.
Maybe we should have asked for some predictions as well. That would have been interesting.
Yeah. All right. So I'm gonna leave it for 15 more seconds. I see that people are still voting. All right. So let's share the results. Can you see Morten?
Yeah, I see it. It was me, I think, Aline, who hit the hide button because I had it on screen. Sorry for that.
No problem. All right, so what do you say about these results, Morten?
Yeah, so I think that's really interesting, especially as we move to the next bit. You can say where I'll be sharing my screen. I think the people on the call here have got it pretty well nailed down in terms of what we are also seeing. So yeah, definitely, I think there's some you can say consolidation in what we're seeing on this call and what we are also hearing from our customers in general. That's really interesting. But let's jump into it. Can you pass the presenter to me maybe?
Absolutely. So let me hide the poll results now, and I'll make you presenter.
Let's see if I can get this going here in the right fashion.
All right.
Is it loaded, Aline?
Yeah, I can see your screen.
Super, and I hope just the PowerPoint, so we stay as secure as possible.
It is the PowerPoint now.
So I'm just going to jump through your slide before I'm jumping to mine. So yeah,
Absolutely.
good to meet all of you, and thank you for listening in. Luckily, I can see the attendees list, so I see a lot of good friends on the call as well. So good to have all of you here. So jumping into my bits, we're going to be first of all sharing the customer insights as we see them, and the feedback we received for the customers through 2020. Which I think has been a really interesting year, by the way. Also a great year for Heimdal in terms of growth and even through the pandemic. So thank you all for your support as well. So looking at 2020 and what has happened there on your side of the fence, you can say, we've seen a lot more cloud adoption acceleration. I'm sure a lot of you on this call have also seen the same. We could clearly see that from the votes. And in that regard, a lot of people have moved to Microsoft E5 especially. There's a strong, it seems, move towards using the Microsoft products because they come embedded and integrated into the Microsoft packs. So clearly that's one way people are going. Also, you can say with the people working remotely now under COVID in many countries, it definitely makes sense that you don't have everything in a central infrastructure. Everybody can work from everywhere. So that's also been a big trend. And of course, the same organizations such as Gartner and Forrester have also mentioned the same. Clearly, now we need to focus on the protection of the single device again, because now everybody's working from home. So as I'm sure you all recall, over the past, let's say 6 and 10 years or so in the industry, first of all, it was the endpoint. If you go back 10 years ago, probably, then it was kind of the infrastructure. Now clearly this move back to the endpoint, but it will go also to the cloud now. So now it's a mix between the cloud and the endpoint. Then also we've seen a very strong shift towards unification of security products, especially, and the products that companies choose to use. So because there's so much movement towards the cloud, also people are in increasing degree using the Microsoft stack. And of course, we've also aligned our products towards that Microsoft stack, so we fit very well with especially the E5 offering from Microsoft and generally the Microsoft offering overall. But what we see with this is actually that on the customer side, and that's very interesting, I think, just sharing some numbers from our customer database here, we've seen our customers adopt for 35% more products with us. So not only, of course, have we increased the customer base hugely through 2020, but also we have had an increasing interest in say, lateral movement between our products of 35%. So that's a lot of extra product adoption, where we see customers choosing to have more modules from our suite. And also in that, as many of you have maybe already learned from our website, we've started to move towards something brand new, which we call E-PDR. So a lot of you have also heard about EDR, but we've launched a term called E-PDR, which is Endpoint Prevention, Detection and Response, which we really believe is kind of the new story going forward and what people will be looking for. And we saw the same actually from Gartner not more than a month ago. So Gartner definitely seems to agree, and so does an analyst firm called Kupping & Cole. So there's definitely some movement around that prevention element now coming into it. And those of you who've known our suite for quite a while, historically the Foresight product has of course had that prevention capability in it. And now a lot more will happen around that as well in the market, we're sure. And then last but not least, access governance. That has been a key movement as well. I saw more of a voting for that than the unification. But clearly, of course, access governance has been absolutely crucial in 2020, again, because people are working from home. So having local admin rights on desktops and stuff like that all of a sudden became bigger problems than there were before. Managing updates remotely as well. How do you do that if people have limited rights? And there were a lot of questions springing to mind between all of you in terms of how you manage those in the remote working climate. And clearly there's been a great pull towards managing those admin rights sessions in a good way. Of course, by the way, we'll have a Q&A at the end, so you're more than welcome to just scribble down any questions you'll have, and we'll get to them. In terms of trends, I also just want to share the trends that we've seen overall, which are not necessarily customer movements, but just trends in the market. So first of all, there's been kind of a new norm, everybody working from home, kind of emphasized the need for, again, the security being strengthened around the device you're working on as you connect to the company infrastructure from home. Of course, the attack surface has increased tremendously again. You know, the hackers or cyber criminals are very, very creative in coming up with new ways to find their routes into company infrastructures. So that has also definitely been a big movement. And then we see that continuing going forward, that, you know, the more devices you use or the more medias you use, the wider the attack surface will also open up for cyber criminals. Now also we need to bear in mind it's not only actually the software which has been vulnerable in 2020. Intel CPUs, you know, Apple CPUs and the likes have opened up for all kinds of new sorts of vulnerabilities as well. Then and we'll get more into that later, that this is really interesting, but we see these very detailed attacks targeting big companies and state infrastructures, also planned by state sponsors, you can say, where you go for high value data. So that's definitely also been a big trend over the course of 2020, one which I'll get into more detail on later, and we'll have some really interesting numbers as to how those unfold as well. Then you have the social media platforms, of course, because everybody's using social media. So hackers, of course, also found out that's an easy way to get, you know, into grips with your credentials and get access to your personal information. And then from there, you can definitely leap forward into a company account, because typically people use the same passwords, et cetera, et cetera. So that's also a great way for hackers to get access to company infrastructures too. Then this point, I'm sure all of you will also notice that attacks stay residual for a long time without even being noticed. And then all of a sudden, when you do notice them, it's kind of too late. So a lot of these attacks, which Aline went through, we can see from data, you know, a lot of them have actually been there for a while. So these companies might have been compromised way before they actually thought they were hit, because they think they're hit when the ransomware encrypts. But in many cases, it's way before then, and hackers take their sweet time in harvesting your credentials and using the credentials for a while before they do the final lock of the data, you can say. Then phishing victims, that's clearly a trend as well, and that's continued to evolve. We have some more data coming up on that too, and how that's been over the course of the year. But clearly a trend. But I would still see this one as you can say, it's there and it continues to grow, but it's less important for the hackers now. Also why I'll get back to this point and how that's evolving later in the presentation. And then with more security automation and you can say more unification as well, and there'll be more investment going into preparedness, use of cyber threat intelligence. So we've seen many of these new companies coming up with cyber threat intelligence. But I do believe in the long term that will be integrated into your product offering that you're using. So just mentioning some others, and just Heimdal, of course, but imagine going forward that you can buy cyber threat intelligence from company X, and then you can integrate it into a Bitdefender offering, for example, Of course, that might be the same going forward with Heimdal, that you can buy a intelligence set from one vendor and then integrate it into another. But we'll also see increased sharing between cybersecurity companies as kind of a thing of the future, because the attack surface is simply evolving so quickly. Then going down to some predictions here, what I think you guys should really focus on in 2021. So we've done these before. If you look on our blog, I think we've had some really strong predictions going back to the past. So if you just Google Heimdal Cybersecurity Predictions, you can really see some of the previous items we put out. And all the way back to 2017, I think, and 16, we were really accurate on what actually then happened over the course of the year. If we take them from top, I would generally say one is, when those on the call here are probably not nearly paranoid enough about your security posture. Many of you might not have had what you think is a problem, or many of you might have had a problem and now it's gone a bit in the past. You really need to stay attentive to your security posture. If it's not you, it will be your neighbor. That's probably going to be hit in 2021, sorry. So you really need to stay attentive to this item. Then small companies being hit is a random thing. So small companies being hit already today might think, "Ooh, I was targeted," or "Ooh, this was somebody after my company." That will very seldomly actually be true. The only cases where that is actually true is typically CEO fraud. And I know some of you on this call here, I can see, have had cases with CEO fraud. So that's typically only where these things tend to happen, is where you need to deliver a very targeted message to somebody in the company, typically CFO, to get extortion out or money out of the company. But those are typically reasonably small amounts, as opposed to what I would call the big blockbusters or big ransomware hit on a company of a small size. Those will typically tend to pay a lot more. But what happens is it just helps fuel the chain for the cyber criminals in general. And that leads me to point 3, which is really what we see going forward and what is happening now as a trend, that there's a lot more big hits going on, because it's no longer just random. If you look at the evolution of cybercrime, as I see it over the past 5 years, what has happened is that in the beginning it was random, and it was also less quality materials going across. But if you look at the materials coming across now, they're super top notch. Typically it's marketing automation being used, AI is being used. So the spreading widespread attacks, you can say, are still very, very good when they hit the individual inboxes or when they hit the individual servers. And now we're talking about fine-tuning those very advanced attacks as well. So it's kind of evolved from widespread poor quality to widespread good quality attacks, and now it's moving into super fine masked excellent quality attacks as well. And let me show you how that moves from the market overall. So first step of that is of course the bottom of it. You can say, if you look on the right hand side, you'll see the graph, which is what is hitting everybody. We took these numbers from our database. You'll notice the graphs moving, one being on a separated axis because it's still much less attacks than the others. But these are month by month over 2020. I think some really, really interesting numbers here. And I'll take those first before I take the items on the right. Oh, sorry, on the left. So if you focus on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll have the attacks by source. First of all, you'll overall notice that the web-based attacks are reasonably stable, even though there's an increased usage of the internet. So that means overall the web attack surface in percentage-wise is at least decreasing a little bit. We only saved the email data for a limited time for our customers, so we didn't have too much backwards telemetry for that, but we can see the last 4 or 5 months there, and you can see the telemetry there overall for the year. We know that that's been reasonably stable. For many customers going into especially Q4, there was quite a good peak, but overall the market was stable for email attacks. And again, because the email volumes are still going up a little bit, overall we can see that attack surface is also stabling out and kind of being a little bit more flat. But what you notice here on the graph is of course the brute force attacks. So those are totally exponentially evolving. You see the beginning of the year with kind of a lot of spikes coming in. So that's what I call the first wave. Typically, kind of you go back to the beginning of 16, maybe, where we had these widespread attacks, but lesser quality. And that 2016 was a year of enhancing how you did the attacks. Now brute force is the same. It's been around since 2017, but it's still in trial mode. We're trying to get wiser as the attacker here as to how to do this in a good fashion. And definitely there's been some good learnings because they are getting very, very good at it as well. I'll show you that on the next slide too. And you can see now that that's a stable trend. Attacks are coming up with brute force. They're coming up all the time. It's getting more and more common, and the quality is increasing. So if you look on the left side now, what I call the small real problems of everyday IT management, user clicks is something that they should not be doing. And that's a bit of text missing there. Apologies for that. It's something they should not be doing, but you shouldn't actually worry too much about it because it cannot typically lead to widespread attacks. Then you have the email attacks. They can lead to breach of credentials and customer data. But again, if you had the right credential management around your user accounts and so on, it won't be too big of a problem. Users can be moving data out of the environment. Yes, I know a lot of you might be looking at DLP solutions and so on, but in reality, is that a big problem? When we look at what is actually happening in the companies, the IT administrator accounts are actually the biggest problem because that's how typically the big attacks happen and where it gets really bad for the company. And let me just show you that. You have the screenshot down there on the left we took from a customer recently. Luckily, you can't see who the customer is, so we make a point of anonymizing that. But if you look at how the funnel evolves, which is coming up now, and then how that data transpires, let me get you that on screen. So if you look at small companies being hit is a random thing and how that fuels it, and if you tie that back to the slide I just had before, what happens in reality is that, like I said, it's not actually the problem that users click something or email attacks can lead to breaches. If you look at it, it's really the accounts you use on your systems that are the biggest problems. So if you look at it, small company scales, as I call it, can cause big concerns because small companies typically don't have the necessary infrastructure to keep the IT up to speed and rename accounts and do all this management that is necessary. So if you look at these graphs here on the left, what you notice is that the administrator account is the one that is most frequently attacked from the most common angle, which today is actually getting to be these phishing and brute force attacks. So if you look at the trend, what you need to do first of all when you leave this call is rename any accounts you have called administrator, user, or admin, because those make up the biggest part of the attack exposures that you have. And of course, for small companies, which could be your potential customers if you're one of our partners, that's definitely going to be a big problem because they don't have the resources to think about these things on a day-to-day basis. And if you look at it as a funnel for the attacker, this is where the SMB companies get hit all the time because brute force attacks coming in, they don't even notice them. Phishing attacks coming in, they might even get lured into. So that's the problem. Whereas for the enterprise customers, and they're moving up the SME and the mid cap, but in reality in the enterprise, it's different because they do have the resources to think about this. So here the hackers have to come up with something else. They have to be creative to move through the attack surface and get into those companies. And that's really how we see it moving through the coming year. What I think will really be what I call mind-blowing. So as I explained before, the attack chain, if you look at it over time, again, these high volume attacks that you see here, the funnel ones, you have the very cheap but reasonably rewarding because they come in every day. So you have the brute force items coming in, and that's very rewarding because again, people forget to rename the administrator account, the admin account is there, typically even the user account is left on the system. So that's very rewarding. Email attacks are still reasonably rewarding because people will click something and they'll get compromised. We'll have a little bit of fun with that as a hacker. Web-based attacks also, still reasonably rewarding, but a little bit more seldom and harder to complete now that people have actually started patching and doing these things on the systems. Phishing attacks still work, especially again because the administrators forget to rename the accounts. They're left wide open, so it's called administrator, user, admin. I'm just recapping because that is really a critical item. But for the enterprise customers, as I said before, it looks differently. The attack chain goes through the supply chain because the enterprise customers typically will have renamed these accounts. They will call them something differently, so they're harder to hit in a mass attack, and then you need to find another way in through the door. Of course, there are also exceptions, and some might be thinking, yeah, but this guy is forgetting Maersk here in the Nordics or companies in the UAE who did get hit this way with these brute force attacks as well. And that's true, they still happen because there will be from time to time accounts which they neglect to rename. And the ones I can just recall from the top of my head is, of course, as I said, Maersk and then Norwegian Hydro. Those were brute force attacks for sure. But that's not how they typically get in. So if you look at my prediction for the coming year, and if you're coming in here from a large-scale enterprise, this is what I think you need to be thinking of. So we had this SolarWinds attack, which I'm sure you're all very aware of, happened recently. I call it the Big Short because big companies and government will be part of an ecosystem of geopolitical tension. So you can say the small SMB companies will be fueling the monetary funds into cyber criminals accounts every day, and that is happening every day, as we shown on the slide before. $17,000 a day. That's a lot of money. You can do a lot with that, but that money is being refueled into bigger attacks now, where you can get even more extortion and even more money out of them. And that's of course where, with you running a big company, you will get part of stuck in the middle. Because you won't necessarily be able to, resist such an attack from a very, very skilled hacker due to geopolitical tension. I think this US-Russian tension is a really, really good example of that. And I think these hacks, when you see them, this SolarWinds one was, of course, mind-blowing in itself, but that's just one of many now. So in 2021, I would expect to see once a month that type of scale attack happening. And I don't necessarily think that will happen through cybersecurity vendors such as SolarWinds. I think that exposure will come through any type of vendor you're using. So I do also predict that in 2021, companies will be much more strict towards their vendors about their compliance, their certifications, how do they handle security, and we need to be prepared for that, of course. So if I sum this up and then make sure we leave a bit of time for the Q&A and then also going through our vision and strategy. To give you a few tips, of course, as I said before, stop using administrator, admin, or any other common login that is built into the Windows platform. That is the most excruciating attack route that you have available on your systems at the moment. Remove privileges from even administrator accounts. So how do I do that? You're thinking, this guy must be crazy. Well, of course, you must be creating some new accounts which don't have the logical naming to them. So that could be Blockbuster 123, whatever, or Blockbuster admin, or whatever you want to call it, but something totally out of the box which no hacker would think of, but which you can think of every day. And then, of course, you bind some two-factor authentication behind it. That's also a very, very wise advice. Remove local administrator rights, even from endpoints. So that's definitely something we see makes a big impact. You get a very quick, very big impact from that. So that's a highly, highly valuable route to take as well. Use DNS-based security, brute force, and email security in combination. And the reason I say that, and of course, then you're thinking, I just looked at this guy's website. That's precisely what he offers. And that may be true. But what we see is now that hackers will find a way to wiggle through one of these layers, and if you don't use them in combination, your systems will not be able to correlate the data between them. And we've seen a lot of customers this year having brute force attacks, after which could easily lead to email attacks across the company because one account might have been compromised, and then from there they take the credentials, start sending out emails, and then all of a sudden they start moving around the networks, taking data out of the network, which of course a DNS-based security system would typically pick up. So that in coordination with privileges just makes the security posture a lot better to manage, and that's one of my strong recommendations for 2021 as well. And that further, by the way, talks into this unification that we've also seen in 2020, that will continue into 2021. And then, of course, just be aware that your opposition is tremendously outgunning you, because cyber criminals are around in the thousands, and IT administrators are typically only around in the dozens or in the couples for a company. So yeah, just be aware that you're outgunned. So you need to think very smart and very practically about what you do in the infrastructure that you're operating. And then before moving to the Q&A, I just want to share a kind of final slide on what we are looking for 2021. You can see the link also at the bottom. We actually were kind enough to post it out in the open, and what we're expecting to that will happen in the market, and what we are seeing that we will do with that. So we believe going forward, as you're all aware, this E-PDR trend has been going on for a while. So I think back in 2018, it really started moving. We had players such as Carbon Black coming about, SentinelOne. So these guys were really talking about E-PDR and how do you handle E-PDR. We were also talking about E-PDR. We believe and see now that is becoming less important, because we all have a perception now that to some degree we will get compromised. We believe, therefore, people will additionally add that prevention trend to it. So like we said earlier in the call, E-PDR, we believe, will be the new thing. We see Gartner talking about it. We see KuppingerCole talking about it. So that's definitely something we expect, and we believe that DNS will drive that trend because it is the most commonly used attack angle alongside the patching. Which leads me to point 2, of course, because we do believe that most companies now will pick up, or have already picked up in a big degree now, patch management, but a lot of you probably find it very boring. So I think some might be giggling a bit and laughing a bit in the background, because I think everybody sees that. I mean, patch management is super boring, and nobody wants to sit there and load packages into the system. And that's why we believe hyper-automated patch management and asset management will definitely further amplify that patching trend that we've seen happening over the last 3 or 4 years. Privileged access management, we already talked a bit into it, but we believe that is the quickest route to reducing the attack surface and increasing the security bar in your company. Taking away the privileges, again, removing those highly critical administrator and admin accounts, because believe me, we can see those attacks happening every day and all the time. Even as we're talking here, an admin account is probably getting hit somewhere. So take those out of your systems. And then again, this unification. I'm a firm believer that we'll see more of that coming up. Again, for some of our good partners I see on this call, they will already notice that we are launching further products to extend our lineup and bring more unification into the lineup. And that is definitely a trend we see continuing going across 2021, because it's all about your time. So as an IT administrator, you need to save time and you need to manage your time well. That's precisely what we are expecting in our product lineup as well. Aline, I think that sums up my bit of the talking, and I think I've talked plenty already. So thank you for listening, everybody.
Thank you, Morten, for sharing all this information with us. I think everyone found it really valuable. Now we are on the Q&A session. So do you want to make me presenter again, or do you want to advance the slides, Morten? However you want, we can do it. That's no problem.
Sorry, I think you should just take it, Lynn. Take it away.
Okay.
Then you're also the good guy, because then you have the giveaway probably. And I can remain the villain.
No, you're the good guy, I'm sure. Right, so this is the Q&A session now. I see that we have people thanking us for the information that we shared. There is somebody that's asking us why all cybersecurity forces can find a solution to ransomware encryption, and will we see any solution to ransomware encryption in the near future? I already know the answer to that, Morten, but I'm not sure how much you'd like me to say about it. So do you want to take it, or should I just?
Yeah, I can definitely take it. And then let's take a couple of these questions for sure. I mean, first of all, on the ransomware encryption, the reason it's really hard to solve, and in general, there will probably be multiple people working at it, is of course because it's very hard to know when a change to a file is something that is expected to happen or something that is not expected to happen. And you need to tell that to the operating system. But yeah, totally, it's a good logical thought. We are actually launching, as we speak, a what we call a ransomware encryption protection product, which will become available, which does precisely that. So at the end of January, maybe mid-February, that we will have a product offering available, which addresses precisely the encryption question. I'm not going to sit here and announce that it's going to be 100% bulletproof, but it's definitely in the direction of what has been asked here on the call.
All right. Thanks for sharing that. I didn't know if you wanted me to share the news already, or if you wanted to keep a little secret a little bit more. So thank you for that. Now, do you want to take the next one, or I'll take it? I have one asking me, do you think that with the release and mass adoption of the COVID vaccine, organizations are going to be more relaxed in terms of cybersecurity once people go back to their offices because they'll be on their corporate networks?
Yeah, that's also a super valid question. I think to a large degree that people will actually not be going back to the office as they were before. That's of course a little bit culture dependent, and I'm not going to throw any culture verdicts here because I'm not Donald Trump. So, but I think in principle, that depends a lot on the culture. If there's historically been a culture where you work in the office, that will probably come back, and people will work in the office. Here in the Nordics, we have a very liberal culture. I think to an extended degree, people will be working from home. And yes, to the question directly, I mean, I think there will be a lapse in security posture for a short while, because the IT department will need to adapt to the new threatscape as it changes, however way it changes. So yes, for sure, there will be some gaps there opening up.
All right. And this one's actually really for you specifically. It states question for the CEO. So it's asking, if you were a CIO, what would be the top 3 items you would tackle in your organization cybersecurity wise in 2021?
Well, I would jump immediately to my my free advice, you can say it well. The first one I would do, if it isn't done already, I would definitely get that admin and administrator account out of the way, because trust me, we can see that those are being hammered. So if you imagine having a nail gun, that would be loaded with administrator and admin accounts, basically. That is what is being targeted, number one. Then, as I said, also getting the privileges out of the systems. So the privileges are limited. That's also absolutely key. But then, of course, further to that point I mentioned before, because we see the brute force attacks are so abundant, the web attacks are still very abundant, and the email attacks are still very abundant. You need to make sure that those are in place if you don't have them already. So those are kind of the 3 things I would emphasize.
All right. Well, I think due to time constraints, these are all the questions I'm going to take today. We'll get back with answers to you guys via an email in the upcoming days. So rest assured, you will get your answers in an email. Thank you for the questions, of course. And now I will move on to the giveaway. And I suppose everyone's eager for this. So everyone who attended the webinar can get a 30 days enterprise extended free trial of our product. Of course, a free vulnerability assessment by one of our cybersecurity consultants who will be in touch with you in the upcoming days. And you will also receive an email with your free Thor Foresight home license key for 1 year and 3 devices. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, we conclude our first webinar in 2021. I, and of course Morten as well, would thank you very much for your questions and for the time that you spent with us today. and we hopefully managed to provide you with insightful cybersecurity information for the upcoming year. Please take a minute to complete the post-webinar survey, as of course this will help us deliver even better content and materials to you in the future. And until next time, we wish you all good health.
And the best of 2021's as well. I don't know if it's just me or Aline dropped out for everybody, but thank you for joining the call, everybody, and have a great 2021. Happy New Year.